Atlanta used to be one of the most affordable major cities in the entire country, but now, not so much. It's gotten a lot more expensive over the last few years, which begs the question, is there still good value here? And what does it actually cost to live in Atlanta in 2025? Today, we're going to talk about the cost to purchase a home, the cost to lease. We will talk about taxes, utilities, childcare, and so much more. Now, if this is your first time visiting my channel, welcome. My name is Mark. I'm a realtor here in Atlanta, and my specialty is helping people relocate here from other states and even other countries. If you're interested in a free consultation to help you plan your relocation to Atlanta as smoothly and stress-free as possible, use the link in the description below to book a call with me anytime. So let's get right into it. What does it cost to buy a home in the Atlanta area in 2025? Now, when I started making YouTube videos back in 2019, I would make budget videos such as what can you get in Atlanta for $150,000. But today, you'd be lucky to get a decent lot for $150,000 in Atlanta. So if you are looking to make a purchase, what kind of budget do you need to find something decent and move-in ready? Let's pull up some statistics from the local MLS to see what things are going for these days. All right, so we have our data here from the local MLS, and we have all price ranges, all property types, and we're looking at the greater Atlanta area, which is essentially Metro Atlanta. We could see the median sales price as of August 2025 was $425,000. Now, Metro Atlanta is a huge area, so this price is going to be driven down significantly by homes in much more rural areas that are much cheaper. Let's narrow down a little bit and look at ITP, inside the perimeter of I-285, which is a common way that locals refer to being in town or out of town. So we have ITP pulled up, again, all price ranges and property types, and we see that the median sales price is $447,000 in August 2025. So this is somewhat informative for what you can expect in the Atlanta area. However, it's way too broad. We need to narrow down into your specific scenario to really help you prepare what to budget for. And it's important to note, it's going to be a huge difference in between a single family detached home and an attached option like a townhome or condo. For example, if I narrow down to only detached single family home options, we see the median sales price was $526,000 in August. But if we filter for only attached options such as condos or townhomes, we see the median sales price goes down to $385,000. So it's important to ask yourself, especially if you're working on a lower budget, do I really need a single family detached home, or can I be open to an attached option as well, because you're gonna get much more value there. And of course, the size of the property is gonna make a huge difference as well. For example, if we filter for only single family detached homes, 2,500 square feet or more with 4 bedrooms or more, we see a median sales price of $975,000 inside the perimeter in August 2025. Now, don't freak out. All of these statistics are kind of skewed in a sense. For instance, this one being skewed by the massive, expensive, luxury mega properties inside Atlanta, multiple millions of dollars, are going to drive this median sales price up. So while you don't necessarily need a $975,000 budget for this scenario, you can see how important it will be to drill down into what property type, size, and location you and your family will be looking for. So statistics are important, but honestly, so are anecdotes from experts. A lot of times it can speak more directly to what it is that you're seeking to know. So, as a realtor who's sold real estate for going on 7 years in Atlanta and helped people buy homes inside the perimeter and all around the metro, what would I tell you you need for a good budget to buy a starter home? So let's look at a map as we do this, because obviously it's going to be very location specific, and I'm going to give you some broad strokes. So please take this with a grain of salt. And when we talk about starter home, just think at least a 3-2, at least 1,500 square feet, and move-in ready, not necessarily high-end finishes. So if we're looking inside the perimeter of I-285, I would tell you generally you need a starting budget of at least $400,000 to find something very comfortably move-in ready with maybe a few updates. Now, as we get down below $375,000, that is where you need to look out for cheap flips, low quality renovations. You might be in a less developed area, or you might be moving into a much older home with a lot of deferred maintenance. Now, when we get closer to $450,000 is when we might see a more nice renovation and of course a slightly larger property or in a slightly better area, some combination of those things. So at the high end, I would say $450,000 is a nice starting budget ITP. But again, this is very area specific, so these numbers are referring to, I would say, middle of the road areas inside the perimeter. So some of the still developing areas on the west side of Atlanta and also on the east side and the south side of Atlanta, that's a budget that's going to do really well for a first-time home buyer. Now, as you know, watching my channel, learning about the parts of Atlanta, a $400,000 budget is going to do way less for you in the more expensive areas like the north side of town in Buckhead or Druid Hills, Chamblee. And it's not going to do much for you in the inner core popular neighborhoods like in Inman Park, Grant Park, Reynoldstown, Old Fourth Ward, so on and so forth. For all of those areas, you're probably going to need a budget closer to the low fives to get something move-in ready. Now keep in mind, with all the numbers that I'm quoting you, if you're okay with a condo or townhome, you could probably take anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 off the budget that I'm discussing right now. So that was broad strokes for ITP. What about if you want to live in the suburbs? Now, if we take a budget of $400,000, that is actually going to do pretty well for you just outside the perimeter to the west, south, and east. And honestly, it'll probably do better for you in these areas than it would inside the perimeter, with the exception being north of the perimeter, where on average, the school assignments are higher quality in counties like Cobb, North Fulton, Gwinnett, Forsyth. You're going to need more than a $400,000 budget typically to find something comfortably move-in ready. In one of the neighborhoods north of the perimeter, from the northwest Marietta, Smyrna area over to the northeast, kind of Gwinnett, let's say Lawrenceville area, I think your beginner budget is going to need to be at least $450,000. And if you need a much larger home or something with some updates, it's going to be closer to a $500,000 starting point. Now again, we're talking about a typical 3-2, 1,500 square foot plus detached home. So if you're okay with a 2-bedroom home, if you're okay with a townhome or condo, you can get by with a much lower budget and get by in some of the trendier areas like Buckhead or somewhere around North Atlanta. But this is not a budget that is going to get you into every neighborhood in the Atlanta area. For example, you've probably heard about Alpharetta. Everyone wants to live in Alpharetta, right? But you need to realize you're really not going to be able to buy much of anything for $400,000 in a desirable, trendy area like Alpharetta. So it's important that you prioritize your needs as a home buyer. Is it going to be the school assignments and thus a certain location? Is it going to be the size of the home, or is it going to be the finish and quality of the home? Which of these is most important to you will determine what kind of budget you need to purchase something in the Atlanta area. Now, a lot of you watching may not be interested in purchasing a home right now. You just want to know, what does it cost to rent a decent place in the Atlanta area? So there is some good news on the rental front. Rents are coming down due to a sharp increase in supply, in particular multifamily housing. So as of September 2025, the median rent for Atlanta was $1,572. Now that is a significant decrease from the peak in September 2021 of $1,800. And back around 2019, when I started selling real estate, a decent budget for leasing in Atlanta was only about $1,200. So you've had some significant swings up and then back down for leasing in Atlanta. And generally speaking, $1,500 is a pretty good budget to find a nice rental in town in Atlanta. Now again, this is going to depend totally on what you want. If you only need a 1-bedroom at a $1,500 budget, you can be in Buckhead or Midtown or any of the trendy areas in a small unit in a great location. Of course, if you need a 3-2 plus in one of those areas, that budget isn't going to cut it. Now, maybe you're a single person or a college student and you're all about spending as little money as possible. You can spend as little as $700 to $800 a month if you're willing to just rent a room. Maybe it's a pad split scenario or some sort of boarding house scenario. You can still find very cheap options if you need them and if you're okay living in a small space with other people in the home. Now, on the other end, you may need a single family detached home, and many people are surprised that this is a very common rental scenario here in the South. And you don't need a crazy budget to do so. In fact, if you're looking to have no shared walls, you want to rent a single family detached home inside the perimeter, I'm going to say you need a starting budget of around $1,800 to find something that's a decent size and that's in decent shape and not a total wreck. Now, if we're talking about that same scenario in more of the suburban areas, I would bump that up to at least $2,100 a month. But as I said, rents are coming down, and honestly, the gap in value between renting and buying right now because of interest rates has never been larger. The truth is, if keeping your cost of living as low as possible is your priority, right now renting makes a lot more sense than purchasing something in Atlanta. All right, let's move on now to taxes. This can be a tough one to wrap your hands around. I'm gonna give you some general numbers to help you prepare. So first off, Georgia has a flat state income tax of 5.49%. I would note there is some movement here in Georgia to potentially completely eliminate that. It hasn't happened yet. We have a 5.75% corporate income tax here, and we have a 4% sales tax rate for a combined state and local tax rate of 7.38%. Now, if you're wondering about property taxes, the best way to think about this is your average effective rate, which is basically the percentage of your home's value that you're paying in taxes each year. And Georgia as a state has an average effective rate of 0.72% of your home's estimated value that you will be paying in property taxes each year. Of course, that's extremely general for the entire state, so you're really gonna wanna drill down into which county you're pursuing. So let's run through the average effective rates for each of the counties in Atlanta's metro area. Gwinnett County is 1.02%, Fulton 0.91%, DeKalb 0.95%, Cobb 0.69%, Clayton 0.91%, and Forsyth 0.78%. So as you can see, these aren't massive swings. However, if you're trying to decide between a Cobb County or a Gwinnett County, this could be the difference maker for you, as Cobb County has a much lower average effective rate than Gwinnett. And yes, each county has different exemptions and special rates for special situations such as seniors or military or teachers. There are all kinds of tax rebates and discounts depending on what your situation is. So again, you're gonna wanna identify the 1 or 2 counties that you're interested in living in and drill down into what the effective rate is there and what sort of exemptions are in place. All right, let's talk about utilities. What is it gonna cost you each month to keep your home warm and have the internet and all that good stuff? And this is a really important one to touch on because parts of this have increased dramatically. You may have seen it in the news. Georgia Power, which is one of the only sources of power in Georgia, has increased their rates significantly. Many customers, including myself, have seen their monthly power bill nearly double. So again, in many ways, the cost of living here has increased significantly. Now, a quick Google search for average utility costs will show you $189 per month for all your utilities. That is for a 915 square foot apartment, which is obviously very small. So again, anecdotes are important in this scenario. I own a fairly typical starter home, a 3-2 at about 1,500 square feet, pretty much in the heart of the city. And I'll just break down for you what my average utility costs are. So first off, for internet, I use AT&T. It costs me $70 for pretty high speed internet. I have no issues with the connectivity or speed. You could spend more than that, you could spend less than that, but I would say on average for decent internet, you're gonna be in that range. Now my monthly water bill stays fairly consistent, anywhere between $40 to $60 a month. Now obviously gas and power are gonna alternate depending on the time of year. In the summertime, my power bill is way up and my gas bill is way low, and vice versa in the wintertime. So we're just wrapping up summer here now, obviously, and typically in the summer, I'm gonna expect a power bill with my AC running nearly all the time of around $140. But guess what? That has nearly doubled since Georgia Power made these ridiculous rate increases. My bill the last few months has been in excess of $250 a month with no significant changes in usage versus that time last year. Now, I do expect this to drop again as we go into the winter months, but just know that if you're planning to keep a large home cool in the summer months in Atlanta and you're using Georgia Power, you should expect a bill in the multiple hundreds of dollars. Now, luckily, gas during the warmer months stays pretty cheap, around $40, maybe even a little less. And as I said, in the wintertime, as gas usage increases, I'll see a monthly gas bill anywhere from $80 to maybe $120 a month. All right, let's touch on childcare real quick. And like everything else, this is going to be specific mostly due to the age of the child that you're talking about. Now, if you want to deep dive this, I found a great blog on tutris.com, cost of childcare in Georgia, a breakdown for 2025. We could see the average cost of infant care in Georgia is around $11,000 per year, which breaks down to about $922 a month. Childcare for a 4-year-old is going to average about $805 a month. Now, there are grants and subsidies available, but they are very restrictive in terms of how much money you can make. So this is going to be out of reach for a lot of people, unfortunately. But as you can see, like many other aspects of living in Georgia, childcare in Atlanta is not cheap these days. All right, and finally, what does it cost just to go out in Atlanta, right? Just socially, whether you're by yourself or on a date, how expensive is it to have a good time in the Atlanta area? And I'm gonna be very honest with you. The value right now is just not here. And I say that as someone who's done a decent amount of traveling amongst other major US cities and gotten a feel for how far your dollar goes. I can tell you as someone who has been here since 2008, these days it feels like I'm spending New York or Miami prices, but not getting that value or experience. It is really hard to leave your home in Atlanta these days and spend less than $100 on some social experience. If you're just solo and you're gonna grab a casual lunch, it's probably gonna be at least $25 for you for something decent, unless you're smart and go spend your time on Beaufort Highway. If you're doing casual dinner, maybe an app, maybe a drink or two, again, by yourself, it's probably gonna be at least $65. And of course, if you're taking a date, if you're going with someone else and you're paying, you probably wanna at least double both of those figures. Date night at a higher end restaurant where you're having a good time, you both had a few drinks, you had some entrees and some apps, you're gonna be at least $185. And one of the ways that Atlanta is known for getting you is their parking prices. In areas like Buckhead and all the trendier spots, for some reason, they love to charge you $20, $40, $60 just to park. So you definitely want to keep that in mind and be strategic when you can. I'd say on average, you're going to spend $7 to $8 for a beer and around $16 for a decent cocktail. Now, we know these days going to a major sporting event is extremely expensive. Bottom line is, if you're going to a game, whether with a friend or with your kid, and any of the major sports, you're gonna be dropping a few $100s for sure. You're gonna be dropping multiple hundreds of dollars easily. Now, we have some great attractions here that won't necessarily break the bank. You can go to the High Museum, the aquarium, the zoo, Atlanta Botanical Gardens. Now, these things aren't dirt cheap, but they're not outrageously expensive, and sometimes there's discounts depending on what county you live in for these. But I have to tell you, in terms of value, this is one of the most difficult aspects of living in Atlanta for me. We simply do not have the quantity and quality of food and drink spots that American cities of a similar size and population have. And yet the places here are charging like they are those bigger, more popular cities. So personally, I don't spend a lot of time patronizing the higher end places in the trendier areas like Buckhead. I like to stick to areas like Beaufort Highway and Duluth for authentic, affordable cuisine. But just know, if you're moving to the Atlanta area to save some money from your current living situation, you're gonna wanna be really careful about how much you go out. All right, so there you have it. Is Atlanta still affordable? Well, comparatively, if you're coming from San Francisco or New York, yes, you can get some great value here, in particular with the housing. However, the salaries are also much lower here, so you have to compare and account for that difference. I do think there are still a lot of aspects of living in Atlanta where there is good value, but there are also aspects of it that are really awful value, like we just talked about your eating and drinking experiences. So hopefully that gave you a sense of if Atlanta is the place for you and what you can expect to spend living here. As always, I really appreciate you watching. Please feel free to book a call with me anytime. I love it when my viewers become clients. Please like, subscribe, and post a comment below, and I'll see you next time.